Good afternoon, everybody. I can see that the participants list is growing bit by bit. So welcome to this webinar on prevention of youth homelessness. And today what we're going to be discussing are some concrete and practical examples of how we can prevent youth homelessness. In Fianza, we've been talking for a number of years about the importance and the value of prevention and early interventions when we talk about homelessness in general, but specifically when we talk about youth homelessness. And I think some of the feedback that we've gotten over the years is that pointing to concrete examples of prevention in action can be hard to find. And so what we're hoping today is to inspire you with some practices from Wales and Finland to show how different approaches can support young people from becoming homeless. This webinar that we have today, I'm going to just share a quick link in the chat box. The practices you're going to hear today are also linked to a publication that we published earlier on this year before the summer. We basically published this 17 practices towards ending youth homelessness. The idea behind it was to, again, give more concrete examples and to inspire services across Europe to learn about different approaches to combating youth homelessness. It's broken down into two different sections. One section talks more about general approaches, for example, prevention as one. And then the second half of the publication looks more at specific target groups. So looking at youth leaving care, young women, LGBTIQ young people, or young migrants experiencing homelessness. And so we have this webinar today, but you might also be interested, if you click on the link, you'll find both the publication to the 17 best practices, but you'll also see that we have 3 more webinars coming up between October, November, and December. The next webinar is on the 26th of October, and it's going to be on youth leaving care. And so there we're going to look at 2 more practices around how we can support young people who are leaving care. So if you are interested, please register for that webinar, which takes place in about another 2 weeks. Otherwise, I am going to ask our panelists to start. I'm going to start with, I've just realized, Talog. I've never said your name out loud. So I've always just been speaking to you. I've never had to address you. So I hope that's the correct.
You did a good job. It's good.
Just wanted to make sure. So I'm going to hand over to Talog, who's going to present a project called Upstream Programme from his organisation LLamau in Wales. And if you have any questions, there's a Q&A chat box, so you can feel free to add your questions into the space provided. And if they're directly related to this particular project, I'll come to him after, or otherwise we will have time for questions and answers after. So Talog, over to you.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my screen again now, so bear with me a second.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have liftoff on screen sharing?
We do. That's perfect.
And there we are. Technology works. So LLamau has been around supporting young people with housing issues and young women as well. For about 30 years. Over the past 20 years, we've sort of started to work much more on prevention work as well. And what we're looking for really is the holy grail of working out a way where we can get prevention into young people's lives before they reach crisis point, and try and identify kind of who those young people are and what services to provide them with, before crisis. So what we found was whilst looking around for this kind of approach, we came across something called the LLamau project, which was based in Australia. Similar programs going on in Canada and USA. And I have to say, Australia, Canada, and USA, the teams there have been fantastic in supporting us in kind of getting this off the ground in terms of their research and kind of what they've been up to. Canada even designed our little logo for us down at the bottom of the screen there. They've been awesome. Basically what it is, it's a program that aims to identify young people prior to crisis, and it aims to reduce the risk of future presentation to homelessness departments, or in some cases to children's services. So it's just about kind of getting in there sooner and trying to reduce the kind of that kind of crisis point that young people reach before they need to present. So the basics of it is we have a digital survey which we take into our partner schools, and we survey the global population within a school. So we try and do the whole school, and we're looking for key indicators of risk. So things that we know through experience. A lot of our service users have shared in the past. So things like conflict at home, family breakdown, maybe school disengagement from community. So we're looking at all these kind of risk factors through the digital survey, pulling them all together and trying to work out what we may be best to support, before crisis is reached. Upstream staff work with the school staff to discuss the pupils that have been flagged by the survey, and we kind of work quite closely with the school on the kind of well-being of those children that we like to work with. The support that we offer is mediation and emphasis. I'll talk a little bit more about those two services in a minute. It's quite kind of specialist, but we also work with the schools, pastoral teams and things, because what we're finding is quite a wide base of need within, from the survey, we're pulling out quite a wide base of need, and we're just kind of looking at how we can support the widest possible amount of pupils, really. The survey, which was developed and designed for us with the help of Do It Profiler, it's an online survey. It's about 40 questions, which covers resilience, well-being, housing issues, and educational engagement. It's the instantaneousness of it is fantastic. So as pupils are completing the survey, it takes about 30 minutes to do the survey, and we normally do a kind of 15-minute chat as well to let pupils know what it's about beforehand. It's browser-based, so anything with a very basic browser and an internet connection can do it. You can use phones, you can use tablets, you can use Chromebooks. So we use the school equipment to kind of deliver that. And we're just kind of getting a good feel from the 40 questions about kind of where those young people are in terms of their kind of well-being and resilience and housing issues. We try and work around the school as much as possible. Obviously, we appreciate staff at schools who are incredibly busy and have had a very kind of exhausting couple of years because of obvious reasons. But yeah, they've been working very hard. So we try and minimise the impact on them by doing as much of the work as we can, going in and providing the surveys. We do all the kind of admin of the surveys and things. The surveys are very similar to a BuzzFeed kind of quiz. There's that kind of format, so young people are quite familiar with it and kind of in their comfort zone with it, really. We only ever get anonymised data. The survey doesn't use pupil names. What happens is when a pupil undertakes the survey, the school collect their name next to their username, so the school has a document that links all the pupils to their username. So anonymous for us, but quite detailed as far as the school is concerned. The wider impact of Upstream at the moment, what we're learning is it's offering obviously quite a wide range of data. So it's a voice direct from pupils, so schools can really understand kind of the needs of their communities. So obviously talking about things like bullying, it talks about things to do with their school experience, as well as the issues that we're raising around homelessness and things. Hopefully offers schools opportunity to identify gaps in current services and things the pastoral team can be doing within the schools. Also maybe sessions that schools could put in place to support young people with other wellbeing issues, and hopefully helps us engage with pupils sooner rather than waiting for them to present at 16, 17 to homelessness. We offer two services we offer are quite specialist. We've got family mediation. LLamau has been providing family mediation for about 20 years. That was my background, I was a family mediation worker for LLamau. And essentially what we would do is, as 16, 17-year-olds would present to the local housing teams, we would go in and we would talk to the young people. We would then go and see what we could do in terms of building bridges back with family members, seeing if we could kind of resolve conflict, seeing if we could kind of tackle some of those issues, kind of head on with that young person and help support them back into the family, even if it was about creating a support network for them if they did have to leave home, that they had the best support they could. But that's essentially family mediation. It's about where engagement is broken down within the family. Emphasis is the sister project to that, and what Emphasis looks at is where a young person shows some of the signs of risk, but a lot of it is more to do with that young person not engaging outside the family. So it could be in terms of engaging with schools, with the school. It could be engaging with community activities. It could be kind of anxiety-based. Yeah, lots of young people we support through emphasis are maybe feeling anxious about going back to school after COVID, etc. So it's about kind of putting them back in and supporting them back into mainstream education and things. We also, as we've said, we're finding a lot of other information out about these pupils. Things like pupils being worried about family homelessness, where maybe they've overheard parents talking about rent or mortgage arrears, and looking at what we can put in place. So working with housing options projects and things in the local authority, and seeing if those families want that kind of support from us. The monitoring is quite an interesting one because we are getting the voice direct from young people. So every year we're hoping that pupils retake the survey, and that gives us quite a good indication of a pupil's journey through secondary school. So from year 7, when they're 11 years old, right the way up to 18, they'll retake the survey each year. And not only then can we track the individuals as they go through, particularly if they've had support from us, we can hopefully see that some of the issues have been kind of resolved. But it gives the school quite a lot of data on kind of how people are passing through their schools. Hopefully the information that we've got, one of the projects we've going on at the moment is to work with the local authorities to see if the young people that we're supporting are also the young people that are showing up in their statistics as well, because we can cross-match with that with the local authorities. So that's because we don't have the people names, it tends to be the local authorities working directly in partnership with the schools, but using our data to see if all that data fits together and kind of brings out interesting results from that. On to some findings quickly then. So far we've run 1,254 surveys across 7 schools. That was exciting trying to do that in the pandemic when most of the schools are shut quite a lot of the time. I had a full head of hair, I think, when I started this project, but it's taken its toll, I think, trying to get those surveys done. So I'm going to share with you some of the numbers from that. These are numbers, so these are individual pupils rather than percentage. But out of that kind of 1,200, on the question, I feel safe where I live now, it's a scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree. So there's 5 kind of in the spectrum there. You've got the kind of 5 questions, the 5 buttons they can click on. Out of the 1,209 clicked on, they strongly disagree with feeling safe where they are. 16 clicked on, they disagree, and then there were 69 who were unsure if they felt safe where they are now. Obviously for us, that's, they're young people that we need to go and talk to, and there's, the schools know who those young people are, and can maybe give an opportunity to those young people to talk to a member of staff or one of our staff to see if we can offer any support and find out what's going on in a bit more detail. Conflict at home, this is definitely one of our targets. So for mediation, if there's conflict going on at home, obviously we want to be involved there. So, you can see there we've got nearly 200 young people who report in. Obviously, conflict at home during the teenage years can be a bit of a bumpy process anyway, but it's about giving the opportunity to those families to tell us if there's something more substantial going on and getting in there quicker and working with those families before they hit that crisis point. In terms of youth homelessness, we asked the question, are you worried about running away or being asked to leave home? Obviously, close to 80 pupils out of the cohort of just over 1,200 responded that they, to some degree, they were worried. Again, young people that we would go and talk to and just offer that service to. The service is obviously voluntary to families, we're making them aware that those services are available to them, and working with as many as we can. Slept away because you were told to leave or run away because you didn't feel safe. Again, 85 responded that's how they felt and that the circumstances they were in. So again, going to those young people and making sure that they're able to kind of share their experience and work with us if they want to. Risk of family homelessness, that's something, one of the questions we ask is, are you aware of any problems your family have faced in paying a rent or mortgage? And as I was saying before, this may indicate that a family needs some signposting or some support to access help from other agencies, maybe not ourselves, we might not be the best ones to help with that. But there are agencies out there that can give advice and support on those sorts of issues. So we need to put those families in touch with those agencies, is the school happy for us to approach those families and ask. 5% or 66 pupils reported moving 3 or more times in the past year. Again, that's one of our flags because there's quite a lot of times to move around, particularly in a pandemic. So it's just a question of making sure that a young person and their family is okay there. Wellbeing and resilience. In terms of, this is kind of one of the stats that's probably more interesting for the school, but does kind of shine a light on what's going on for the pupil population. As you can see, when asked whether pupils felt bullied or picked on or left out by the students, 81 pupils said that happened to them almost every day. And again, this information gives the teachers insight into what's going on and maybe an opportunity to approach those pupils and just check in on them and make sure that everything's going okay. Obviously, the vast majority of, there's over 1,000 pupils there that were absolutely fine. But for that 81, it's obviously a massive issue and an opportunity to go and talk to them. And this was an interesting one as well. And I'm hoping we will see massive change on this question this year. Because last year when we asked this question, it was in the thick of the pandemic, and some areas where we were working were very badly affected by COVID. But I'm feeling optimistic about the future. 139 just outright said no, they're not feeling optimistic, and 327 said only sometimes. So again, numbers that are kind of worth exploring, and hopefully we will see that rather large and worrying number there in terms of resilience. We hope that gets better over the next year as people find a bit more normality at school. So far, we've supported 144 families through Upstream. We're specifically targeting risk of homelessness, and our secondary target is risk of disengagement from education. From the survey so far, we found 78 pupils in the highest risk category and 40 families that are at possible risk of youth homelessness. So again, these are families that we're trying to put in touch with the right support agencies or support ourselves. One of the biggest things that we're looking to kind of see if we can find out from this is how many of the families that we find and how many of the young people that we find are currently or have received support already. So it may be that some of the families and some of the young people that we're finding through the survey already access support via children's services or from youth services or pastoral teams at the school. So one of the big challenges for us is to find out, kind of exactly what numbers we're looking at. Looking at the survey data, what we found was in the top 10% of, so the top 10% slice of pupils who demonstrated need. So those in the, the kind of the 10% that need us most, 65 showed no risk of disengagement from education. So there's a good chance that those pupils kind of weren't on anybody's radar. So that's what we're looking to do now, and we're going to be working with youth services, children's services and the local authorities and comparing that data, as I said, with the vulnerability assessment tool and stuff earlier. We'll be looking at that data and seeing who is actually being supported out of those we're identifying. Our suspicion is that, similar to Australia, we're going to find about 35 to 40% of pupils who are struggling, but are not on anybody's radar at the moment. So yeah, that's our mission. And I think I've just run out of breath, so I'm glad I'm on the last slide. Don't know, Robert, if anybody's come up with any questions during that. I didn't pause for breath, I don't think.
That's no problem. And if anybody has a question, you can feel free to add it either in the chat box or in the Q&A box down below, and we can collect them. We can also put them to both panelists at the end of the presentations. I might just have a quick question because it's specifically on this particular practice. I noticed in the very one of the first questions that you were asking, there was this difference between conflict in the home and feeling safe at home. And it's interesting that a lot of the response rate was so much higher for there was conflict in the home, but yet the young people themselves were reporting feeling safe in the home. How do you, what would be your understanding of that kind of, that difference?
I guess, there is, I guess it's young people recognizing when they feel safe. They could be, it might not necessarily be arguments or quarrels as they understand them at home. We do a little bit of a lead in with our presentation before the survey takes place, just to kind of outline what we're looking for, not in terms of answers, but certainly in terms of our support and things. So yeah, I would say that the young people are doing quite well, really, to separate what it is to be, what the difference is between feeling safe in terms of, their physical or emotional safety, and what the levels of conflict or argument or disagreement is with their parents or guardians. So yeah, I would say that, yeah, the second question is the conflict is specifically about arguments rather than physical safety, and that's why I think it's so important we ask the first question: are you safe? And that's obviously the priority that we look at, and the priority that the pastoral teams look at when we get the results.
Great. And one more question before we hand over to Tina and Hannah. How easy was the buy-in from youth and education services? And that's a question that comes from Alex Marks. And I guess that's something that a lot of people are thinking of. It's great what you're doing, but how difficult was it for education services to see we have a role here in identifying youth homelessness?
I think it's been a strange launch to a project. We launched, I think our first survey was booked in for the 4th of April 2020, and we went into lockdown on the 23rd. So the schools have certainly had other priorities over the past year and a half since we launched. However, I think the deputy heads and the heads really see the benefit of getting this data from pupils because it's so direct. I think some schools, what I've learned is that certainly in Wales, the school cultures are so different, even in state schools that are just 2 miles apart. And some schools are really focused on pastoral care and really focused on kind of support and stuff. And other schools are very much, their focus is elsewhere, maybe on academia and stuff. So every school has its own personality. We try and fit in with each school separately. And I think that's what we need to do. And what we've learned is that schools are all so different. We really need to ask each school that we partner with what it is they need from us and what we can do for them. And that helps kind of allay some of their fears. I think once they've done the first survey, and they see how straightforward it is, they're bought. But it's getting that first survey run can be the challenge. They're all really keen on the support. The support element of it is easy to sell, but the survey, because it impacts on a lesson, may be a bit more difficult.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alec. And we might have more questions. So if you think of questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to throw them into the chat box or into the Q&A box. And I'm going to hand over now to Tina and Hannah from the Youth Housing Association in Finland, NAL, who are going to talk about one of their projects around preventing youth homelessness. So Tina, would you like to share your screen and perhaps introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for inviting us here. Yes, let's try to share the screen first. Okay, do you see the slideshow?
Yes, we do.
Yes, so I'm Tina Irela, and I work as development manager in Finnish Youth Housing Association, and I have Hanna Younger here with me. Or she is not actually here with me. She is 800 kilometers north from here in Rovaniemi in Lapland. But she is working as a housing counselor, or what I don't know what would be the right title in English, but something like that. And she will give a little bit more practical view. So I will introduce you at first on the subject, and Hanna will share a more practical view later. First, I would like to tell you something about NAL, or the Finnish Youth Housing Association, so that you know a little bit about the environment where we work. So we are a non-governmental, non-profit organization. We have our 50-year anniversary this year, but the first 20 years was pretty much advocacy and the construction of youth housing and the services started in the 1990s. We are a national umbrella for 23 local associations. And we own a non-profit constructor and a supported housing services providing company or floating support services also. Our funding comes from the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, and the funds are provided by our state-owned gaming company. So the funding comes from lottery and slot machines and casinos and all that. But the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health gives the money to the NGOs that work with social and health issues. And our core activities are building and renting out apartments for young people, providing floating support, developing and coordinating housing counseling, and the local associations actually provide these services. Also influencing housing policy and promoting the interest of youth, and produce and share information and materials about housing, of course. And the 23 local associations provide services supporting successful transition into adulthood. And there is housing counseling or housing advice, floating support, rented counseling, different group activities and resident activities in the houses. And also courses and orientation on housing. And I will tell you a little bit more about some of these later. We have, or in this null umbrella, there are a little bit more than 4,000 apartments in Finland and around 1,600 new tenants every year, and 17% of those were young people in 2020. Homeless young people. And here's the target group from a housing point of view. But the main point in this slide is that it's social housing that we do. So the acute need of accommodation and low income are a priority in the selection of tenants. I will go forward so that we get to the point. Risk of homelessness, this is what we think about it. Often the first indication in our activities is the housing application. And if there are flaws in filling the housing application, it's one marker of that there might be something wrong. There's inadequate knowledge of housing and skills of independent living, and that comes up often in the interview, because most of the people who get selected for tenants, they are interviewed before the selection process. There is often unsuccessful housing in the past, so evictions or temporary contracts or a lot of moving debts or failure to pay rent or other bills. Sometimes problems with neighbors or problems in following rules. Mental health issues or neuropsychiatric conditions are often one indicator. Substance abuse, of course, and then moving from an institution like care leavers and asylum seekers. So those are people who have little or no experience of living on their own in Finland. So this is like the group of young people that we like focus on when we give orientation, like individual orientation could be for these people. And what do we do to prevent youth homelessness? of course, there's affordable housing, which is very important when the rent prices are high. Then advice and counseling to help tenants keep the apartments. But at the same time, it reduces the risk for the landlord. So it makes it easier for the landlords to select young people who are in a difficult position, who have debts in history and so on. There's orientation for new tenants, and we try to have very low threshold and an early intervention in rented situations and to prevent evictions. And orientation and courses. Some local associations do a lot of courses as well, and orientation is, I think, almost everywhere. It includes basic information about housing and skills for independent living. And these skills are how to find an apartment in the first place, financial literacy, tenants' rights and responsibilities, some basic home maintenance. And maybe the most important thing is what to do if something goes wrong. What to do if at some point you don't have money to pay the rent, who can you contact, and what you should do in such a situation. Then there's one best practice from about this orientation. So some local associations do this individual housing orientation at home 1 or 2 months after moving in, and then it's easier to focus on practical issues. Because if you try to do it when the lease starts or when the housing starts, there's a lot of fuss going on when you sign the lease and they get the keys and you have to organize the moving in. So then we have noticed that it's better to have it a little bit later so that you can concentrate on the orientation. Okay, then there is rented situation, or it's I call it very early intervention because it's often before there is any debt. So it's already when someone hasn't paid his or her rent by the due date, but it might not be like an actual debt yet. But yeah, in youth housing, it's often easy because these housing counselors who are also youth work professionals, they have real-time access to rent debt numbers in the real estate management system, and they can contact the tenants informally, often even before the payment reminder comes from the landlord. So they send a WhatsApp message or something like that, hey, have you noticed that you should pay your rent? And yeah, so it's very easy to communicate. Then there is dialogue and counseling on different solutions. And if you have to do a payment plan, there is comprehensive counseling on managing one's finances, considering tenants' final situation and also considering tenants' life situation overall. And this is efficient because approximately 85% of these situations, the tenancy continues. So we manage to avoid evictions and moving out. There are some characteristics and benefits of housing counseling. First of all, there is a feeling of security. There is always someone to contact, and this is very important for very young people in particular. There is presence in the house, so these housing counselors, they might have their office in the house, or if they don't have the office there, they might be there like once a week or so on. And because of the interviews and the orientations, these counselors know the tenants already from the beginning, and the tenants know the counselors. so it's very low threshold, and it's important because young people don't actively ask for help in general. So it's easier if you know the person who you are supposed to contact. And housing counseling reaches young people who are outside services. And housing brings up problems that might not come up otherwise. Like, for example, if the tenant doesn't pay rent, and when you start to sort out the situation, there is often problems with financial literacy, mental health issues, or other life management problems. So this is a good spot to reach out to people. And then there's early intervention and prevention, which is like Robbie said in the beginning, very important, especially with young people. And then I bet many of you don't have youth housing where you could provide this kind of service, but I think you can do a lot of things even if you don't have youth housing. And housing counseling, it might be easy to sell to any landlords because it's a way to save money for both the tenant and the landlord, and the landlords tend to be quite interested in saving money. So if you have any like social housing or any other landlord that has like several young people that you support in the apartments, you could try to agree about a cooperation. So one way is to agree a point every month when the housing counselor or whatever youth work youth worker you have there, you should get a list of unpaid rents from the landlord. But of course you have to remember to ask permission from the tenant. And this, you can, when you get the information, you can help the tenant understand the situation and find solutions. And tenant can keep the apartment and landlord gets his money. And if not, at least you know the situation in time and can help the young person to avoid more problems and support him or her in finding another accommodation. This is all that I wanted to say, but now I give floor to Hanna, who will probably have some interesting stories for us.
Thank you. It's a bit overlapping what I'm gonna say, but let's see. And if anybody has some questions, please feel free. So I'm Hanna. As Dina said, I come from the northernmost local association, a bit below the Arctic Circle in Rovaniemi. Our association, we have 33 flats in our town. The whole city has about 50,000 inhabitants. 2 full-time workers. We are called housing counselors. We work with the youth who are living in our own flats or elsewhere in the city. As we don't have so many flats, we also, people live in free market housing or wherever in different places. And the basis for our work, I think, for preventing homelessness in our home city is that we want to keep our services as low threshold as possible and build the trust with our tenants from the beginning, like when meeting up for the interviews for getting an apartment or making the contract or seeing them outside and talking to them, asking how it's going, drinking a coffee together in the summer or whatever, and actually giving them the feeling that they can talk to us when there are problems and things don't go as planned, as we all know quite often, or sometimes at least happens. So we basically offer time and listening ears. also with the youth who don't live in our place, we try to use as much time as we can on getting to know each other and building that trust. We give so-called housing advice, which is like can be one time, few times information about just seeking a home. Somebody might have a problem with the landlord, and we try to help with that, with the communication with the landlord, or seeking for different kind of benefits, and helping with that sort of things to keep the tenant having some income and being able to actually pay the rent. We give out these orientations, as Tina explained, but I think our most important work in relation to preventing homelessness is the housing counseling and floating support that we give. And with housing counseling, it's always, we have a contract with the youth. It's free for the youth. They don't have to pay anything, or anybody doesn't have to, nobody has to pay anything. We are helping with the budgeting, helping with financial issues, not giving out money, but like planning on where to get money and how to actually finance your living, taking care of the flat so that it stays livable, that that it stays healthy. That's the most. It doesn't need to be super tidy, but it needs to be a healthy environment for the tenant and for the others around. And the most efficient way is for us in preventing the homelessness is this rent debt counseling, as Tina was a bit explaining, and I thought that I'd tell a bit about how I actually in practice do that, because the time is short. So we try our best to prevent the evictions based on rent debt, because at least in our home city, it's really difficult to get a new home if you have any rent debt. It's anyway hard to get a flat when you have some debt marks, like bad marks, how you say, credit history, bad credit history. But it's even harder to get flat if you have this bad credit history from rent debts, and that's it's a big issue everywhere, but especially like winter is coming, and if you don't have a house, it's not a good thing. In practice, what we do, I get monthly information from our real estate management about the rent payments, and when I see who the names of the tenants who have not been paying their rent fully or at all, I start ringing and texting and trying to contact them, writing letters, emails. If I see them outside, I try to run after them and catch them, just to make sure that we can get in contact and start talking about the problems behind the not paying the rent. In easy cases, of course, it's something, there is a gap in income, like the person is unemployed, waiting for a benefit, or changing from one benefit to another, and the issue might be solved during that month or in the beginning of next month, and it's an easy solution. The person pays the rent and they continue living. But often it's the case there are more complicated situations. There's unfortunately a lot of addictions, drugs, alcohol, gaming, mental health issues, and often, of course, these are kind of overlapping, and for that we need a bit more time to make sure that the tenant is able to pay the rent and keep the apartment. We try to make sure that the tenant has the information about all the right support services that they are entitled to. But a lot of the work and time goes to motivating the person to actually to be willing to take services and to take help, and to understand how important it is to have a home in every situation, especially if the tenant is wanting to enhance the life situation and the circumstances, then the home, as we see, the home is like the key to making other things happen. And we are then trying to get the tenant to make a payment plan with us. And my job often is to make it realistic, because it's often the case that the person wants to get rid of this debt as quickly as possible, and they are saying that they can pay 100 euro, 150 euros per month for the debt, but not really realizing that with all the other costs and essential things that they need to buy, they just end up in this loop of being in debt all the time. And I see that it's better that they are in debt to us than lending money from here and there and ending up owing money to a lot of different places and people from whom all are not so flexible with the payment back time, etc. So I find it also that it's safer for the tenants that they owe money to us than to somebody on the street, or possible on the, yeah, not so easy solutions. And when we come into the agreement, the payment plan, I look at it every month that they are able to pay it. I contact the person, and hopefully we are able to connect this connect in the way that they actually let me know if they change numbers, or if they don't have a phone, or think if they are kind of suddenly vanishing somewhere, that we know what situation. Because of course we also worry then, not just mostly me as a worker, I worry about the person, and then of course the landlords are also worried about the house and the flat, and if these sort of things are okay. But as landlords, I think the NAL Association, we are really flexible compared to private markets, as the aim is to prevent the homelessness. I understand that it's not so easy for free market landlords to be so flexible. We kind of take into account that these risks they just belong to the work that we do. Unfortunately, of course, sometimes we don't succeed, and moving out or getting evicted is the only solution. We try to make it so that the tenants would move out, so that we don't have to get the court order and get the person evicted, because that's of course for everybody included. It's more expensive, takes time, and it's not a good thing in any form. If the situation goes into this, then also we are trying to make sure that there is some sort of support network for the person, that they don't go from our home, from our house to the street. Hopefully this works, not every time, but as Tina showed, Tina had some procents that I think it's 85% that normally the living situation continues in our houses. But yeah, sometimes it's so that the person might have already really huge debts for us, but they are seeking for a place in addiction treatment, for example, and we know that person is on the tip of the list and getting soon the place. So we keep the apartment as long as needed, so that the person can get into the treatment. Because yeah, if you are homeless, it might be that you don't get the place, or anyway the treatments are not that easy to easily succeed. They don't succeed so easily if you don't have a place to stay. So in that case, I'm happy that we are able to be so flexible. Yeah, probably I would have a lot more to say, but I think my time is kind of up. So if somebody has some questions, then please ask. This was just the tip of what we do in relations to debts and rents.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and to Tina as well. So if anybody has questions, again, feel free to put them into the chat box and into the Q&A box. I'm going to get things kicked off, though, to start with a question to go back to Talog, I think both examples are really good and concrete on how we can prevent youth homelessness. I think what's quite interesting about these two different approaches is they're kind of at different ends of the spectrum, where in the Finnish example, there's a very close relationship already between the young people and the homeless and NAL. And so that it's almost that the young person is very empowered to come to them and to know who they can turn to for supports, versus with the Upstream example, it's more that it's kind of an anonymous system where you're putting in your details and there's a risk assessment. And then it's for a combination of LLamau and the schools to say, we think these people are in need of support. So it's kind of the opposite direction, if that makes sense. And I'm just wondering, how open are young people and the families when you offer them supports based on the information coming from the surveys?
On the whole, they've been pretty good. I think the young people are quite used to doing surveys of some sort of description with the schools. I think ours is a bit easier because it's digital, so it's not paper-based, but there are surveys and wellbeing questions being asked in the schools already. I think that the thing for me, and when I kind of first came across the project, it struck me that nobody was asking young people how they were already or in a structured way. So it kind of bemused me that you need a pilot to do that. But yeah, I think that generally the young people are very kind of up for it. You do get some where you've kind of highlighted someone as possibly at risk, and then you go and approach them with a teacher, or the teacher talks to them later, and you know, they clicked on the wrong buttons, or they haven't read the questions properly, or haven't understood that somebody will come and talk to them. That does happen. You do get those numbers come through. But on the whole, we have identified people who are then happy to engage. When it comes to parents, the approach is a little bit different. So before the survey takes place, we send out a letter via the school just explaining what the survey is and what it's about. And at that point, families can opt out. So they could say that they don't want their young people taking part in it. That's kind of a standard thing for, you know, the schools to kind of offer an opt-in, opt-out thing. Ours is opt-out. We haven't had anybody opt out. The you know, the hundreds that we've done so far, nobody's opted out. We have got to the point where we contact a family and the family said there's nothing wrong. But in those circumstances, we just explain that, you know, we're there as a support agency, and we're a support agency via the school. And if they want us at a later date, we're on hand for them. So it's a very kind of gentle approach, really. And, you know, we're only there to work with people who want us to work with them. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it actually does. And I think what's also quite interesting there is they are also signposted that if something does happen in the future, they also know where they can turn to, because that's often the problem. Once you're in a crisis situation, sometimes you don't even realize you're in a crisis situation and you're not even aware of where can you turn to for supports.
I think it's the last question in the survey says, do you know where to get help? And I think it was something like 200 out of the 1,200 people said they didn't. They clicked on no, I don't know where to get help. Most of it was sometimes, I suppose, they were reading into that they need different types of help for different types of circumstances. But yes, about 200 people said that they didn't know where to get help. So I'm hoping that they do now.
And again, a quick reminder for people to put questions either in the chat box or in the Q&A box to put to our speakers. I'm going to ask a similar question to Tina and Hannah. So on the whole, it looks like once you do the orientation, young people know where they can go to and who can support them, and there's a relationship there. But we'll say if you, Hannah, are looking at the list and you can see, okay, there's somebody who hasn't paid their rent this month and they're not in debt yet and they haven't got the notice, and you go to them, does it ever happen that they don't want to engage with you? And if that happens, how do you engage with somebody like that?
Well, I cannot say that it never happens. Let's say it hardly ever happens. Yeah, hardly ever happens. I think the situations where this has happened, it's been so that the person there's been so many problems already in the life that it's either the person is in a sort of a lockdown situation, cannot cope with anything, or waiting for the cops to come and take him or her. But then of course we still try to, if I can in some way contact the person or put a letter on the door and see that it's gone, then at least I think that when I have at least the feeling that I have tried enough to make contact and try to get them to understand that keeping a flat is in your own interest, that even though the debt is already there, the situation is still not, you know, it's not a catastrophe. You can still fix it, because often it happens, you have a debt, or you think you have a debt, and then if there's a lot of problems, you might think that it's okay, I can't do anything anymore, and then you just let it go. So I try to make them to understand that there is still a lot you can do. There is still possibilities that you can fix the situation and you don't have to do it alone. But yeah, that's of course always the most difficult part, to motivate the person to understand that there are solutions, that it's not at the end, you can do things to help the situation. But yeah.
Thank you very much.
If there would be one easy solution, I would be happy to have it.
I think we all would. And Tina, is there anything you'd like to add on that?
No, not really. I think it was a good answer. Yeah, and I think it's important from that point of view to be quite early, so that before the situation is like devastating for the person, so that she or he before the feeling is too like overwhelming, that I'm lost, I cannot do anything. So the earlier you can reach the person, the better.
Perfect, I totally agree. I don't see any questions in the Q&A box nor in the chat box. And so I think that's usually the sign of a very good presentation. I'm going to wrap up the webinar in that case, and there will be a recording made available for everybody to watch back afterwards. And I'll also share with you the presentations that Tina used and Talag used. So there'll be other resources made available. And I'll also send everyone a follow-up email if you're interested in joining one of the webinars that are coming in the series, that are all around our 17 practices for combating youth homelessness. Thank you very much to our 3 speakers for today. And I hope to see you on some of our future webinars. Have a good afternoon, everybody.